Hi guys, hope you're well. So elaborating from my video that I uploaded to Facebook yesterday, I said I wanted to dive into the press release that Pfizer put out regarding their phase 3 clinical trial for their potential coronavirus vaccine. So if you don't know already, Pfizer are one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and they're primarily located here in the United States. But I just wanted to go through some notes that I took from their press release, and regarding the press release, I'll put it up on the screen now, whereby you can kind of get a quick briefing of what they put up. If you're interested in that, let me know and I'll put the link for it below. But also you can just Google Pfizer coronavirus vaccine press release and it should come up. But yeah, I just wanted to go through my notes that I've kind of taken from the press release and then basically explain what that means, explain what describe and explain what they've released and why this could be important for fighting this virus going forward. Okay, so firstly, I will note that the vaccine candidate is a collaboration between Pfizer and BioNTech, and the name of the vaccine candidate is basically been called BNT162B2. So a bit of a strange name. The BNT part stands for BioNTech. And then the numbers are just a random thing that they kind of put out. So the reason they do this is just for initial experimental purposes. If they have a drug that then goes to for marketing and it's safety approved and you can actually go and sell it, they'll provide it with a different name, which is obviously more attractive for potential buyers. So basically what they've found for this vaccine, I will also note that it's an RNA vaccine. So I've mentioned this in previous videos, what RNA vaccines are, but basically vaccination incorporates injection of RNA from the virus rather than dead, live or attenuated versions of the whole virus instead. So basically, first point of the press releases that they've put out is that they found that the vaccine candidate appears to be more than 90% effective in preventing COVID-19 in the participants that actually volunteered for this study. So first of all, that's quite groundbreaking in the fact that this is the most successful a clinical trial has been for coronavirus yet. And the fact it's about 90% effective in patients, sure, it's not 100%, but there's actually a similar percentage level to that you see for smallpox and measles vaccines, which are heavily successful and widely distributed. And obviously in terms of the smallpox vaccine, for example, it helped eradicate the disease. So this is really a groundbreaking press release that they've kind of put out and just kind of emphasizing that can be sometimes overlooked, but because it says 90% rather than like 99%, but it's pretty awesome. So just looking at my notes again, the clinical trial, this phase 3 clinical trial, started on the 27th of July, and it's recruited almost 45,000 volunteers, so that's a lot. And they've also noted that around 42% have diverse backgrounds, so that could be that they're Caucasian, they're Black, Asian, Indian, Native American. It could be all from different areas of the globe. And that's particularly pertinent. The reason for that is because your genetics can highly influence how your body responds to infection and disease. That's why, for example, in terms of coronavirus, ethnic minority groups, including the Black community and the Native American, Native Indian community, are seeing higher proportions of fatalities and serious adverse reactions to coronavirus infections in compared to Caucasians. So this is quite fascinating in that we are seeing effectiveness of this vaccine in a wide range of individuals, suggesting it will be beneficial for global distribution if it passes the required safety tests. I will also note that the vaccine appears to incorporate a dual dose regimen. Basically what that means is that instead of having one injection, it has to be 2 doses. So I think it was over like a 2-week period, you have 2 injections. And that's not new, that's not surprising in some circumstances. Many vaccines you have to get 2 injections or multiple injections, so that's not something to be concerned about. And at the time of this press release on November 8th, they said that 38,000 of their volunteers have received the first and the second dose of this vaccine. Okay, so a really important point to note in terms of the press release is that they say this is interim data analysis. What that means is that they're still collecting and analyzing their data. The clinical trial is not finished, but they basically use statistical models to project the sort of outcome that they might be expected to develop. And because things were looking promising, they wanted to basically provide governments and provide the public with information about how well it is going, so that, for example, world governments can start looking towards the company as the currently, as it stands, it seems to be the world leader in terms of developing a vaccine the fastest, basically allowing governments to align their medical, healthcare and financial priorities with this particular pharmaceutical company. It's really not that uncommon for this sort of press release to happen. For example, some people are potentially worried that because it hasn't been published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal yet, that might be a potential issue. However, with all clinical trials, regardless if a clinical trial works or it fails, you have to publish the results and make it available for the public to view. So, for example, let's use Alzheimer's, because that's my speciality in terms of clinical trials. Clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease drugs do not work. But if you went onto PubMed or other appropriate databases, you'd still be able to see these clinical trials of various drugs, even though they did fail. So, just looking at my notes again, they noted in their press release that they haven't yet submitted it for emergency use authorization. So that's EUA. That's basically approved by the the Food and Drug Administration. So that's the FDA in America. So again, Pfizer, an American company, that's what they're primarily going to be applying for their safety tests through. As you can imagine, that they'll be distributing it in America first. That's my hunch before they start moving it globally. Just kind of emphasizing that. So there are still safety tests that it has to go through, and in the scientific community, we already know that. I think some people can be worried about serious adverse drug reactions, but there doesn't seem to be any. Pfizer haven't reported any severe adverse drug reactions, which is pretty incredible. And I will also note that clinical trials can halt, temporarily or entirely, if even one volunteer becomes seriously sick because of a vaccine or a drug that is given. The health and safety aspects of clinical trials are so stringent and meticulous that is one of the reasons why drugs and therapies fail so much. But so far so good. We've had over 45,000 participants come into this study and no severe adverse drug reactions, which is pretty amazing stuff. So the press release also says that they are trying to determine whether the vaccine can provide any additional protections for people that have already been exposed to coronavirus. So basically, there's been some suggestions that people that get infected with coronavirus could become reinfected, and that might be something to do with the immune system not really producing what's called memory cells and antibodies effectively, which last for a long time. Memory cells are basically, your immune system produces them to remember previous infections. So when you get infected with it again, your body elicits a reaction really rapidly, and therefore you don't produce as many symptoms, and you get over it pretty quickly. But they're interested to see if this vaccine could also help people that have already been exposed to coronavirus once. So, for example, there have been millions of people already infected with it. Could you give that vaccine to people if they have been infected with it already? So, as with many viruses, this COVID-19 is very likely to mutate over time. For example, influenza, that tends to mutate every year. That's why we need different flu shots every year, because some of the proteins they express mutate and change. So finally, talking about distribution and things. So again, some people are worrying that this is going to be coming out too quickly, and I'm strongly going to emphasize that's not going to be the case. So for example, President-elect Joe Biden was in front of the cameras today to talk about his COVID-19 transition task force, and whereby he's emphasized that even though this vaccine could be really beneficial moving forward, it could be months before it's actually distributed, and he's absolutely correct, because there's still so much to do in terms of this study. So Pfizer themselves have projected global productions were around 50 million units of the vaccine in 2020. So obviously you can imagine that's not that much. But in 2021, they're looking at with up to about 1.3 billion. So the worldwide manufacture and distribution of this vaccine is primarily going to start occurring early next year. So my predictions, I'm not a public health expert. I'm not a virologist. But I am an immunologist. Be helpful if I could say the word. I have a rough idea of where this could start happening. I think based on other clinical trials in terms of, for example, like the Ebola clinical trials for their vaccines, I think probably have distribution if it's successful. They've still got to do analysis. It's looking pretty good so far, but they've still got stuff to check out. I would say probably spring of next year is when you'd start getting worldwide distribution, but that's just a hunch. So that's my thoughts on it. Just wanted to break it down for you so you have a better understanding of what's going on. Let me know if you have any questions, of course. I appreciate that sometimes people can be a bit hesitant about the safety of clinical trials and stuff. It takes time to develop new drugs and vaccines, and I think generally people appreciate that, but you also need to understand that there is a worldwide pandemic on, and therefore scientific labs would have redirected their research interests from other viruses and viral related research into coronavirus if they feel like their lab could be helpful. And that's why there's been I guess an increased speed at the rate of vaccine development and clinical trials, but not really that extensively. So it's really not that surprising in terms of the time frame from which coronavirus started causing worldwide issues to actually stimulating those vaccine trials. It's really not really, it's unsurprising is what I'm trying to say. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you're all well, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.